How are you? Good morning or good afternoon. You good? Okay, not too hungry? Okay, so I almost lost my voice yesterday, so we are going to workshop ideas instead of me reading a full-blown written article. Is that all right? You sure? You ready? Just 20 minutes, it's going to be fast, okay? So today my presentation is Sacred African Objects as Regalia, a decolonial approach to restitution. Let's start. So my presentation, I always, when it comes to thinking about decolonization, one slide that I usually like to present is this declaration on the importance and value of universal museums. Are you familiar with that declaration? All of you? Have you read it? Oh, cool, okay. So in that declaration, there is one part that I really like, but which also raises a lot of concern. This part is about the museum being considered as a place of appropriation, and it reads, over time, objects so acquired, whether by purchase, gift, or partage, have become part of the museums that have care for them, and by extension, part of the heritage of the nation which housed them. Today, we are especially sensitive to the subject of a work's original context, but we should not lose sight of the fact that museums too provide a valid and valuable context for objects that were long ago displaced from their original source. And I don't know, but I'm still concerned to see this declaration featured on ICOM website. I know it's an institution that all of us know, and which also carries some complex worldview when it comes to decolonization. And today I just browsed and I saw that and I was like, it's interesting to have a screenshot for history to tell you that up till date, we still have this declaration in many multi-language featured on ICOM website. And my presentation in certain way will address many of the aspects or the elements that could be found in the small quotation that I shared with all of you. So now we'll do the first activity of the day. And I want you, the specialists, to tell me what you see. We have just 1 minute per slide or two, so that we still keep with time. So tell me quickly, please, what you see. A bowl, a throne. Yes. Shelves. Cowrie shelves. Thank you. A spirit. How do you see the spirit? Okay, what else?
A Cameroon object.
How do you know it's Cameroonian? Are you expertise. Thank you. Is it all? Do you know the name of this? Oh, perfect. I'm not sure, I still need to be here because I know everybody knows about it. So what do you see was the first activity which shows our expertise as art historian and anthropologist and people knowledgeable with African culture? Now, I would like to ask you, if you were to address this, what you see, as using either what or who, what will you instinctively choose? Okay. What? Just raise your hands. Okay. Who? Okay. Nothing? Just one person. You know, there's no trick. You're trying to learn in the process. So, and the reason why I started with the activity, what do you see? And this one, if you see any difference between a who and a what, is actually, for me, an opportunity to confront you with two different layers of expertise. Within the museum, we can have skills that we acquire called expertise, specialization, specialist in something very specific. But within the community, we have something totally different. We have experience. And I had to be confronted with these two different forms of knowledge when I did my fieldwork in Cameroon. And when I had to go to the community, presented the object, and the first intuition that I had, or internalized knowledge that I had about art history, museum, and everything, was to call what I see as a what. And the moment you do that, doors are closed. I was lucky enough to be forgiven for that offense, but it doesn't always work like that. Now, for our expertise still, we have a way of organizing information and data within the institution. And by doing that, we kind of conceive many of the items that we have in the storage as cultural work. And the way that we also call catalog cultural work is based on a tradition of what? Labeling, right? It's true? Yes? No? I want to make sure that I'm not saying anything that is not specialized, Is there the way that we catalog information within the museum? Is it using this form of labeling? Maybe this might be a little bit, remote, but is it how you do it? Okay, good. But are there people are there in the room anybody who speaks German? I didn't want to translate because I don't know German that much, and I don't trust AI. So tell me, can someone tell us what is written in there?
It's a large figure sitting on it has a ball sitting on its lap. And its head is covered with staniol. Everything else is covered by cowries, so by shells. And there's a neck ring made from messing. What's that? Copper? Is it copper? No, it's not copper. It's some sort of metal, messing. I'm not sure.
Lead, I think. I don't know.
Thank you so much for your expertise in translation. You're so good. So actually, this is what you said is perfect. It's actually what it means. That's what I had to research after that, but I couldn't make it easy for you, because we are here to learn. And in trying to understand the reason behind this was also an opportunity to go into the language of the institutionalized way of retrieving information about African objects. And here, if we consider this as being a cultural work, then a cultural work is defined as a product of human creativity that have visual aesthetic expression. And everything that we have been doing here has stood at the physical layer of the object: shelves, cowrie, object, bowls, seated on a stool, and everything that we were able to retrieve using our eyes. And now, by doing that, we run the risk of individualizing object within the collection, and that is why the concept of regalia for me comes into play. Now, by referring to gonzo as an object, a material culture, or whatever words that we use to describe the physical property of this heritage, could be considered within the community as lacking a certain sense of sensibility, and that sensibility could be gendered sensibility, but also cultural sensibility. And that is a whole other set of knowledge that we don't just acquire by reading books, that we internalize as members of the community. And for that, it is important to understand now how the way that we conceive of this form of heritage within the institution could be considered from a community perspective as acts of profanation. So we are going to also now define what profanation is if you are ready. What is profanation, please?
Disrespect of spiritual value.
Yes, not, you said scripture, I didn't get it.
Value, spiritual value.
Okay, so disrespect. Yes, I mean, you have the microphone so that people can hear you. Thank you.
Disrespect of spiritual value.
Thank you. What else?
And reducing to object issues which are not object, but living something. The word think is bad in English, but living being, that's the point.
Okay, thank you.
Robbing from its spiritual value.
Yes, thank you so much. I really want to acknowledge these layers of of approaching the concept of profanation, which had the, divine dimension of performing such, which could be considered within the community as a violation. And now, if we go to the etymology of the word profanation, then profanation has two different parts. We have pro and fanum. Pro means before, and fanum means the temple. And within the context of this research or analysis, profanation the temple in here could be the space that is being profanated, but also the name that is profanated. And that temple could be linguistic temple or spatial temple. And in understanding that, that object could be sensitive, heritage from Africa could be sensitive to the place where they are being located or the name that are assigned to them, then we can have one access into the intimacy of the knowledge around this heritage. And that intimacy, for me, I believe, is thinking about material culture, as we call it within the specialist jargon, instead as heritage culture. And heritage culture, in that sense, means that we acknowledge the physical properties and value of those elements, cultural elements, but we also acknowledge the possible invisible dimension that we might not have access to when we come into contact with these cultures, heritage culture within the museum. And thinking about that now makes me want to propose approaching material culture not as material culture, but as energy or energy source. And to think about energy, I want to first make us workshop the whole idea of energy from the etymology. And now I propose to you two possible etymology of the concept of energy. And in that, it reminds me of the presentation that we had yesterday. The approaching material culture restitution as the possibility of reactivating the heritage that were looted during the colonial time. And you remember Professor Jos van Beurden talked about the his encounter with the community, where they talked about reactivating the restituted heritage culture when it comes back to the community. And this means that all these heritage culture that we have within our museums are actually living entities. And if they are living entities and could be considered as energy or energy sources, then we need to understand how energy works. So we are going to do a little bit of Physics 101. I don't know if there's anybody who did physics in the past and who can tell us what energy means in physics. Anybody? No physics? Never? Do you know the words at least? You do? Okay, if you do, that's good. So should be, yeah, one step ahead. So energy in physics refers to a system capacity that produces work and effect change. It could also mean that, energy also exists in different forms and can be transformed from one form to another. And the fundamental principle of physics is the principle of conservation of energy. That means that the total energy of an isolated system remains constant over time, even though this energy may change form. In other words, energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but can only change forms. And this, by approaching now the question of restitution from the kind of energy potential of our material culture that we have in the storage, we start to see now the possibility of transitioning from approaching those collections as objects and approaching those collections not as object but as possible heritage culture because of the energy potential that they might have. And not that they might have, that they have. Especially when we think of sacred heritage culture within the collection. And this goes back also to some presentations that we had yesterday, which highlighted the idea of reactivating. And reactivation means that the energy of the heritage culture is never lost. It could be dormant because it is not in the right space or not handled by the right person or not used within the right context, like exhibition is not like a traditional performance, for instance. And this means also that we can consider this whole idea of energy as, these snakes that eat his tail. And I don't know, it has a word in the European culture. Do you know how they call this image? Huh? Yeah, you're just too intelligent. I just can't. Thank you so much. And thinking about how energy works, it becomes now the idea of. Do I still have time? Oh, okay. So energy now makes me think. Makes me want to share with you some properties of the object. So what we have in the collection, when we approach them from the perspective of energy, we no longer think, touch them or manipulate them as something that is dead, that doesn't have any life, that is inactive. We start thinking about the sensibility of those collections. And the sensibility of the collection now, if I give you the definition that I don't need to question you because I don't have time to workshop anymore. So I'll just kind of conclude this part quickly. The sensibility of a collection now is a state or property of being capable of sensation. It's true that the definition from Oxford Dictionary here doesn't help us that much because they also propose the quality or fact of being acutely affected by a sensitive to external stimuli or conditions. What I want to only kind of keep from this definition is the idea of stimuli, the idea of sensation, and the idea of conditions. But when it comes now to sacred objects or sacred heritage culture, as I would like us to start approaching, considering this collection, I want to instead think of hypersensibility, because sacred objects are hypersensitive. They are not just like normal objects. They have senses, they have a life. And this excessive sensitivity to an external factor or agent or to any form of stimuli could be triggered by different factors. The factors could be space, that factors could be time, or it could be language or the words that we use to refer to this collection. And if in acknowledging these different properties of the object, which means the energy, the life, and the sensitivity of our African collection, then we start now to thinking about Ngonso as a sacred heritage culture. And I had an interview with Dr. Boulami Edwards in 2023 when I did my field research in Cameroon, where he said in her homeland, so in So, the space where Ngonso was kept is called in Lamso, Kikav Kewang, the vault where Viva Fewang were kept. So he used the word, the things of the palace, but I really believe that he meant, because, French or Romance language might not translate the nuances and subtleties of African languages. He could have meant the heritage cultures from the So community. So acknowledging the fact that before it was looted, before she was looted, Ngonso was kept in a specific space that had a specific name, and disregarding that spatial consideration when putting this heritage culture within our collection, we are indirectly performing an act of profanation, or which could be also considered within the community as deicide, similar to stealing, for instance, the Eucharistic, I don't know if, Eucharist, right? Or the crown of thorns in the Catholic Church. So it's the same kind of impact or damage that has been done to stealing Ngonso during the colonial time. And if Ngonso is then hypersensitive to space and time and was kept in a specific place, it is important to remember the historical context in which this heritage culture was looted. He was looted as a consequence of a colonial vandalism, but also the looting was in bulk. So within the place where Ngonso was kept with other form of regalia, unsaw regalia, all of these royal regalias were collected in bulk, looted in bulk, and then dispersed across Europe. So now, when we think of restitution, I want us to think if restituting only Ngonso could not be considered as a failed restitution. Because from the community perspective, Ngonso is a regalia that works in tandem with other royal regalias or royal heritage culture. And this is what has been, pioneered by the, this is what has been pioneered by the Bring Back So and Ngonso movement. And in that movement, they also reclaimed other So heritage, among which are, if we're thinking of category, the Sarkinchi, which has to do with royal necklace. We have the Kva, which is also royal, considered as being royal thrones. We have the Ntara and other categories. And the grassroots movement now impulse a form of pan-museum awareness and pan-museum restitution plan that is geared towards not just focusing on one restitution case, but thinking about the power networks of the material culture, heritage culture that have been claimed by the community. And this is the reason why, for me, thinking about restitution has been an institutionalized thing, or that has to align with museum traditions of considering object as individual unit or as unit, individualized unit, could lead to many cases of failed restitution. There needs to be a concerted pan-museum restitution and repatriation plan that acknowledge and integrate the community worldviews into the approach to restituting heritage culture when they are being reclaimed. And the case of Ngonso now helps us thinking or understanding the kind of effect of such such approach on the way that we think about restitution and repatriation in a decolonized way. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, we are quite happy to be here to be able to present our work, and many thanks to the conference organizers. Before we get into it, I would just like to say something about the context of our work. I feel like we are going to be repeating a lot of stuff, but okay. We work for the Weltkulturen Museum, the World Cultures Museum, and as the name suggests, World Cultures, it's an ethnographic museum with a beginning in 1904. That's also nothing surprising, but it places it in the middle of the time when Germany was officially a colonial power between 1880 and 1919. And I'm giving a little bit this context for a reason, because Germany, of course, like all the other European powers, were very active in acquiring territories, and by 1914, Germany was in third place after the British and the French. And this is a history. The acknowledgement of this history struggles to find space in the memory landscape of Germany, because this memory landscape is dominated by the memory of the Holocaust. And even when this German colonial history does find space, it's often downplayed as being relatively brief in relation to other European colonial powers. And this colonial history is, of course, inscribed into the collections of the museum. For example, there are many objects from what is now Namibia, and which were collected in a period when the area was officially under German dominance, including also the time of the genocide on the Herero and Nama peoples between 1904 and 1908. And it's very significant because in 1904, the museum held 4,000 objects, and by 1908, there were 16,000. So this background is the starting point for the two projects we are going to present, because in our daily work in the museum, whether it's at an exhibition opening or it's in workshops or making a tour, we are continually confronted with this lack of knowledge and awareness about Germany's colonial history and its continuities in the society. We are faced with stereotypical expectations, with expressions of othering, which in part these stereotypical expectations were also created by the museum itself. So this is what we were confronted with. And we thought at the same time, museums are regarded as, there are a lot of trust is attributed to museum. And visitors or non-visitors alike regard museums of places where the information is very credible and authentic. And so we thought we could harness this trust in the museums to create a space which is participant-centered, at the same time also a responsible space to create a space of unlearning, a space of critical reflection and dialogue. And we're going to briefly present two such spaces.
So, as Julia said, I think it's okay, you stay. Okay. Yeah. We work together in the educational department, and obviously we do workshops, we do tours, but we also engage in curating. And for us, curating and education really is something that we think together. And so we had the chance to curate the exhibition Hidden in Plain Sight on being rendered invisible and becoming visible. Maybe one thing for you also as a background knowledge, we don't have a permanent exhibition, so we change our exhibitions constantly. So we have 2 spaces, one changes once a year and the other is a smaller and experimental called Weltkulturen Labor, and there it changes even more regularly if it's open. Right now it's closed. And in this exhibition, we approached it from a perspective that we wanted to open a space for unlearning, open a space where we show the colonial DNA of the museum, as well as look for hidden stories that are embedded in the items that are in the museum. And so here's just a little bit what we had. We had a combination of objects from various regions, but we combined it with artists, contemporary artists, always looking for counter-narratives, looking for the neglected stories, and looking also for embedded stories of colonial times, but from a resistant perspective. So there was, for example, the wall of known, unknown heroes, where we invited the users of the museum to get to know a lot of figures that are not part of history books, but we also invited them to inscribe figures that they wanted the other users of the museum to get to know about. There is a risk in these things because you always have to look what people are writing, and we also had to discuss, okay, how much do we curate this wall? But in the end, there was nothing that we would have said, oh, we have to take it down, or we can't, we don't stand behind this. So people really used it very carefully and shared a lot of knowledge. We also used the stairways, so you can see it's like a last century building. It's a villa, it's a house, it's not a museum. And that was also for us a moment of unlearning, because we wanted to embed it in the colonial story of the last 500 years, but we wanted to use not just like a timeline or whatever, but we wanted to use quotes by people. And first of all, we had hegemonic voices and resistant voices next to each other, but then we thought, no, we don't need the hegemonic voices. We can narrate the story even better from a perspective of resistance, because resistance always existed. This was, just to show you one example of an artist, Frau Hermiko. She would question the institutional bookshelves. So what is missing on bookshelves? What needs to be in there? And so she went into our library. We have a big library, it's a public library. And also there she found contested categories that the books were sorted in, and she also found a lot of gaps, and so but she also found a lot of treasures, so she curated this bookshelf. And then just a little, we can't go really deeply into it, but one of the very first things that we wanted people to engage, and that also goes back to what Murielle said, because we are always confronted with these categories of knowledge. And so everything is based on, okay, there's a name, there's a number, there's a date, there's someone who collected it. Often there's no one who it belonged to or who created it or what it was for. And we wanted to start with, to highlight and also to make people start think about these categories. And during this whole process, we invited also a few people to critically shake our certainness. And so there was Hoden Wazame, and she said, when we presented the idea, she said categorization creates order and supposed objectification. And this exercise of self-categorization can get visitors to realize the fact that categorization always happens from a certain perspective. And we have a handling, we call it hands-on collection, but we didn't want to use it, so we used our daily items that we are surrounded in our homes, and we put it on display, and we let people find new categories for it and find new closenesses and find new ways that they would relate things to each other, and also then question the whole system of which knowledge is deemed to be important and which knowledge is completely neglected or left out.
Okay, so I'll be just looking briefly at a workshop which we created. It was created originally during a conference, but during a year's 2 or 3 year long project, but it has developed a lot since then. And this workshop is called "What is that doing here?" And we created it with the background idea was how can we use the museum objects, which are the museum items, which come from a colonial context, and use them as starting points to talk about the colonial legacy of the institution, and beyond that, of Germany as well. And we also looked at how can we make topics such as restitution, talking about ownership or about provenance research, how can we make these topics accessible for visitors, and how can we get in dialogue with visitors about that? And we created this this research project. It's a workshop. It takes the form of a research project. It's for students who are upward of 14, as well as for adult participants. And it goes for 3 hours. And it's centered around the cluster of questions, which is intended to irritate and activate discussion processes of unlearning. As a first impulse, we start with a personal question about what reasons might motivate the participants to give a family heirloom to a museum for safekeeping or not. And this question immediately it grasps people, and it gets them it activates a kind of critical thinking about accessibility. What happens when I give my heirloom to a museum and I cannot see it as I wish? They think about value. How do you determine, how is value measured? How is meaning measured? And how personal that is? And about decision making. Who makes that decision to give a thing, give the object to a museum or to keep it? And so from bridging from this personal level, we continue. Each person is given an inventory card. We've seen this before. And each participant gets an inventory card which they look at, and it gives them a first insight into the span of information which the museum has in relation to an object. And the first moment of irritation takes place here, because the participants are they are often astounded by the paucity of information which the museum has available, and they often comment about there is no specific information. There is no information about who made this object. There's no information about significance or meaning. There's nothing precise, and their assumption that the museum would possess an expertise knowledge about the objects, about their relevance, about their significance, this does not get satisfied. And so you have a very productive unsettling of expectations in this process. And this gives us an opportunity to initiate a conversation around knowledge practices about the production of knowledge. For example, that certain information was not deemed significant at a particular time. Or we ask, okay, what stories are there? What stories are missing? How could we find out about them? If we were to research, what would be a next step? Who would we have to visit? We discussed these questions, and so we look at how structural inequalities, structural power inequalities affects the production and dissemination of information, of what's called knowledge, and how it promotes only a partial story. The second phase is putting creating a kind of context of this, of how this colonial history is interwoven in the collections, and it's acknowledging that there is a web, there's a complex web of power relations. We also, as Stephanie said already, we make a point of emphasizing the voices voices which have been traditionally marginalized, and we add quotes which testify to resistance, because we wanted to avoid creating another kind of timeline of conquest, but instead to look at it through the lens of resistance, rather.
2 minutes.
How many?
2 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. And so they then focus closer on 3 objects, particularly objects with current relevance, like Benin bronze, maybe you could or an ekori from Namibia. And after they studied this, they have the chance to go and talk to the custodian of this collection, because most of these objects are from countries in Africa. And they talk to the custodian, they ask questions, and again you have that same conflict that sometimes the curator does not have an answer. She does not know. And so this expectation of reliable answers gets disturbed again. And it leads to further irritation, because the participants, they have to grapple with this idea of reliability. What does the custodian know? What does she not know? And even if she knows something, where did she get her information? And how reliable is it? And can I agree with it or not? And this also creates an in-reach for the custodian, because the custodian is confronted with the questions and with the fact it becomes transparent that there are certain things she doesn't know. And so it creates she's also forced to reflect on her expertise and this idea of the institutional production knowledge. And there's only one other thing I want to say, is that after this talk with the custodian, we come together again, and there's a discussion so that these different questions and these different ideas can be interlinked again. And there are 2 points which come out of this discussion, or let's say, well, let's just say one. We just talk about one. There's one point which come out of this discussion, is that participants are often in a kind of conflict between this idea of responsibility for the cultural heritage and the conservation for the future as represented by the depot and the custodian. And at the same time, there's a kind of moral feeling that the original owners of these items have a right to their own material culture. So it's a kind of tension they come to. And we have something called an argument box, where we bring out arguments into this discussion to kind of ground this discussion so it doesn't get too arbitrary. And for example, we point out that in Germany during the Second World War, countless objects were destroyed. In fact, from the very museum, the Weltkulturen Museum, there was a bombing which destroyed a third of those of their collections. So it bringing in information to, in a way, counter these ideas about security and safety. Yes, and I would just like to leave it there. Thank you.
One round of questions.
Well, thank you so much. I have a question for Murielle. Thank you so much for all your presentations. But my question, you spoke a lot about the community. Well, I had other questions, but let me focus on this one and maybe we can talk later. So you talked a lot about the community and this idea of energy, and that you presented the concept. And I take it that you are inspired by the community's perspective on this item that is now in the museum. Could you tell us a bit more about this community, and especially in relation to religion and religious diversity in the community today?
Thank you very much. Actually, mine is not, I don't know whether to call it a question. I want to commend the presenters, especially Sandra. I commend you very much for your presentation, and I like how you took us through the process, especially on the part you talked about the gonzo. But what actually captured my attention most was the question you asked, that will restituting only gonzo not be a failed, is it objective or I don't know. I think I missed that part. When you asked that question, first of all, I think I should introduce myself. My name is Edith. I'm from Benin City in Nigeria, and I'm a PhD student in ULISBOA. The thought that crossed through my mind when you asked that question was that, for instance, in Benin, before the British invasion of Benin in 1897, the Benin had so many historical reliefs or carvings, sculptures such as the Benin bronzes or wood carvings that were created to document significant events, achievements, or stories. All these were known as commemorative artworks. So the question I actually want to ask, the contribution I want to make is that all these commemorative artworks were actually meant to document important events in Benin before they were looted. For instance, the commemorative head had an elephant tusk on top, and which documented the event of every Oba of Benin that reigned and the important events that took place. So now, the question I'm actually asking is the same question she asked again. If at the end of it all, they return only this commemorative head, after disrupting the Benin history for so long, I made an event that were documented from the 15th century up to that 19th century. Will restitution not actually be a failed attempt? Thank you.
Thank you so much for both talk. Muriel, you helped us very much with the definition of avoiding, speaking of objects, speaking of cultural heritage. And I would like to understand, because the museum in Berlin has huge Cameroon object, huge one. Very surprising, such a short colonization and so huge elements. So how is the restitution situation? Because beyond the cultural difficulties of the different parts, you know, in Portugal we have very little step for restitution, and so it would be interesting to know from Germany what is the situation concrete. Is there a perspective of restitution or not of this spiritual being, what you discussed with us?
Thank you. So when it comes to the first question, I was going to present one article where I developed the NSO belief system, where it's a complex system in the sense that there is a belief in sacred objects, as it's called in the museum, that are connected to the activities within the community. We have agricultural activities, which is one of, one distinctive activity within the community, and Ngonso was used also for ritual cults or traditional ritual performances prior to the first the first stages of agricultural work. And by stealing or looting this cultural heritage, there have been a lot of disruption in the way that the community interacted with the soil, interacted with the activity, like subsistence activity. That is why I was thinking of a cosmogony of cultural, cosmogonies of sustainable development, because these heritage cultures that are now in the museums were integral part of the community development approach. So they were actually integrated in the way that the community viewed development. And thinking about religion, now we see that it is tied to every aspect of the community's existence. And and responding to the idea of religion, I believe is more like Western concept that might not be representative of the soul worldview. But in the way that they approach their relation and connection to this heritage culture, there is a form of direct connection, and that is why the looting or the absence of Ngonso and all the regalia that constituted that heritage, the fact that they are no longer within the community has caused or is believed to be responsible of a lot of crises, and especially the Anglophone crisis currently going on in the northwestern part of the country. So we will not, I will not just want to, emphasize on the spirituality of the connection between Ngonso and the community, because I try to really explain it based on the information that I collected on the ground. But religion is not just abstract from the perspective, as is being considered here in the Western world. It is something that is internalized, it's something that is part of every aspect of the community life. And I would just invite you to read that article. I know you don't have the visual, but at the end, I think we have PowerPoints available for everybody, right?
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, so you'll be able to read more about that conception and the complexity. Now, for the second question, Ngonso, unlike the Benin board, cannot be, systematically considered as memory or commemorative board. It goes beyond that. Ngonso is a matriarch who is believed to be the founder of the entire community. So it is what shapes the worldview and the identity of the Nso people. And Ngonso is part of of an Italia regalia. So there's a systematic way of organizing heritage culture within the Nsor community. But when the looting took place, there was no consideration about Ngonso being kept with other heritage culture. They were just collecting, what they considered to be objects and then looting them and even burn down the palace, the entire palace. And now, when it comes to restituting the heritage culture, are we going to think of these looted objects as individualized unit, or are we going to think of it as a set? And that is why I raise the idea of a fair restitution, which is not my position, but the community position. Because in the Ngonso case arised other restitution claims. When you saw the image of the throne and the necklace and the throne and the third heritage culture that I shown on the image is part of a whole set that is still being claimed by the Nsor community. And one consequence of not restituting, one reason why many of the images that have been claimed by the Nsor movement are not available for the public gaze or the public, information is because many of them are sacred objects that within the community might not be seen by women, that are not supposed to be seen by the public. Ngonso is not even supposed to be seen by, the public. So that's the reason why when it comes to thinking about restituting Ngonso, the community also wants the object, but also believe that it has to come back with what constituted the Nsor regalia. And that is why I talked of a failed restitution. And I think there are discussions that are on the way to really restitute the entirety of the Nsor cultural heritage, which is scattered across Europe. There are some objects that the University of Mainz promised to give back to the Nsor community. I think they were, for what I saw online, they were 2 to 4 objects that they consider as being Nsor heritage. There is the Linden Museum that promised to give back, I think on January 14, 2024, 28 Nsor cultural regalia. And there are also other maybe museums that are maybe potentially in close discussion with the community to return additional Nsor cultural heritage. And then we will hope that we will then be able to talk of a successful restitution, because then the worldview of the community and the approach to the question of restitution will have been not just acknowledged, but also integrated in any restitution attempt by the German government. And now when it comes to the last question, I didn't say heritage culture, but cultural heritage. Not cultural heritage, rather, but I talked of heritage culture. The same way we talk of material culture, I just swapped the material by using heritage instead of material. And by thinking of heritage culture is actually acknowledging the biodimensionality of those heritage, the invisible and the visible dimension, especially when we refer to sacred regalia or sacred collection within the museum. And you asked the question about German perspective on restitution. Is that what you said? That is going to be a very complex, a very complex question to answer. I don't know if you don't have any.
Well, there was a delegation that was traveling around Germany last year, and they would look into what is there. But they said, we need our time, and we will come back to you. And there's no coming back to the German museum so far. But what happened concerning the Cameroonian collections is that they are all, like in the book from Bénédicte Savoy, they are all collected together. And so it's at least that is, people can see what there is. Yeah. But there's, I don't know. Which state?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.